I'll call the committee to order. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. There are two packets today. We're going to start with packet 1. And on page 1, House Bill 2, or excuse me, yeah, line item number 1. And this is also one of the items that we took up yesterday, just the back half of it. Questions, comments? LBA, any comments?
So this first item here, House Bill 2 Amendment 2008S, would restore many of the programs that are currently funded by the Education Trust Fund back to the Education Trust Fund: school building aid, tuition and transportation, special education aid, charter school lease aid, and also adds court-ordered placements to the Education Trust Fund. So you can see in 24-25, it's a dollar for dollar offset, moving it from general funds as the House had passed back to the Education Trust Fund.
Senator Roseman.
Thank you. Mickey, what doesn't go back?
Nothing.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, I think everything that was,
Everything
yeah,
that's
nothing.
currently in there.
Yeah, the amendment puts everything that currently is Education Trust Fund
Thank
back.
Further discussion? Senator Bradley moves.
Second.
Senator Ennis seconds. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Number 2, and Mickey's going to explain this one because he does math different than I do, I guess.
So, item number 2 is Amendment 1764S, which is, we'll refer to it as the adequacy amendment. I think everyone has seen this. We do have copies of the detail behind this posted to our website under the Senate Finance Committee. This is what will tie to all the spreadsheets, the adequacy spreadsheets. The amounts that you see here would be budget estimates budgeted estimates changed from what the House had passed. So in total, it's within $1 million for the biennium of the House's ed funding plan. And I think you all have your spreadsheets and I can answer any questions.
Okay, the comment about the math was that if I'm spending $3 million in 24, but I'm saving $3 million in 25, the number that you see is the difference between those two, and not just taking the sum of the positive and negative. So that was the math problem I was having. All right.
It all works out.
So do I have a motion on
So moved.
number 2?
Second.
Senator Ennis, Senator Pearl. Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much. I think Tim Lang deserves a lot of, Senator Lang, a lot of the credit for coming up with this formula. There are some changes between the House level and the governor's level. We split the difference on base adequacy, split the difference on free and reduced. Where we really pump things up because we don't have stabilization is in extraordinary needs, and that is meant to target school districts that, quite frankly, have extraordinary needs. Our spend is the same in this amendment, except for the $729,000 as the House spend. It's a total of $156.9 million more than current formula. There are no towns that lose money. Let me repeat that again. Every town gets the same grant or more. Senator Lang's 2% escalator ensures that unless a town is one of the swept towns, that retains money raised locally over and above the adequacy level. Those towns don't get any increases, but every other town gets, an increase. In my opinion, the communities in New Hampshire that need it the most are going to be helped the most. That is, I think, having been through education funding discussions going back to 1999 when I was in the House, that is where we should be targeting state dollars to communities that need it the most. So that being said, I have been approached by a couple of folks in the House that felt that some property poor towns weren't benefiting as much as they did under the House plan. I met with Senator Lang yesterday afternoon. We haven't had a chance to actually produce the amendment, but I intend to bring forward an amendment on Tuesday that would raise the hold harmless from the 2% to 4%, that will address the concerns that have been raised by those communities. That would increase the overall spend by about $11.5 million in the budget. I think that is a reasonable place to end up. There'll be no town that will have, with the new money, a loss of funding. So Senator D'Alessandro, Manchester, it's going to be at the same level as in this spreadsheet, but a town like Derry that does have hold harmless would be a beneficiary. I think that's appropriate. And I think that, as we've tried to address, and this is the first time we've really discussed education funding, but as we've tried to address some of the priority items that I think all of us on a bipartisan basis know have to be addressed: childcare, housing, Medicaid provider rates, education funding, and the pay raise. Those are the big five. I think we have done a pretty good job of living within our means, but at the same time addressing those key issues. This will provide for property tax relief in many communities across our state. That's appropriate. It will help fund public education. It will increase base adequacy and free and reduced lunch in particular. I think that helps us as we see the outcome of the litigation. I think this is a good formula. No formula is perfect. It's just the way it is. I certainly probably represent more donor towns than just about anybody, and there's no help for the donor towns, but there's no statewide property tax, so I think that's a fair trade-off. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if there are any other questions, I think maybe Tim would be happy to answer them too.
Questions from the senators? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Jeb, you talked about this, the hold harmless, which would, and when are you going to introduce that?
It's not ready today. It will be ready Tuesday. And I can tell you it's a cost of $11.5 million over the biennium.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to take the vote on this item today, and then we'll supersede it with the amendment that comes on Tuesday. Everybody understand where I'm going?
Yes, sir.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, oh, wait a second, I didn't get a. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Okay, next up, line 3.
So Amendment 1764, which you just adopted.
Just, Commissioner, we're going to ask you questions throughout this, so if you were up at the table, you wouldn't have to be balancing those papers on your knees, and you would be more available to us when we do. I think I'd rather have you in the front, you know? I apologize for interrupting you, Mickey.
No worries. So with the amendment you just adopted relative to adequacy, the base amount per pupil went from 4,000 to 4,100. Amendment 1998 relative to charter schools, the House had passed the additional grant for charter schools to be $5,000 per pupil. This amendment would lower it to 4,900, which paired with the amendment you just adopted maintains the 9,000 per charter school pupil. The dollar amounts that you see for the budget adjustments are really more reflective of the changes that the House made that were not addressed in House Bill 1 during the House phase. I worked with the Department of Education to come up with charter estimates based on this amendment, and it would result in about 1.9 million over the biennium savings in the Senate budget, but to align with what the estimates are for charter schools for the next 2 years.
Senator Bradley.
Yeah, and I think what needs to be stressed in this is the bottom line of the House position of $9,000 for charter school students is maintained with this amendment.
Additional questions? We'll pause while the conference is. All right, do I have a motion? Senator Bradley moves ought to pass.
Second.
All right, Senator Ennis seconds it. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and we're moving on to page 2. Line item 4 is to pick up funding for 2 schools that are going to have full-day kindergarten. Further comments?
Senator Gray, can I move the item, but move it into FY '23, please?
Oh, okay.
The motion by Senator Bradley.
With obviously the lapsing language that is standard.
Moves the item and the funding to be in 23. And I think Senator Birdsall seconded it? Did I hear that? Or,
Going to, but
oh, I was,
Senator Rosenwald. I was
Senator
going to though.
all right,
Well,
you know. Okay, further discussion on this item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. 5. Senator Bradley's reaching for that button, so Senator
Yeah,
Bradley.
thank you. Obviously, the governor has, in the past budgets, I think, created a $28 million fund for improving safety criteria at New Hampshire schools. My understanding is that there is a backlog of funding. I like the commissioner's proposal, but I'm going to ask that we move it into FY '23 and with the lapsing money.
I'll second.
Before I take the motion, I think that we were going to talk about the full-time position in that, Senator Bradley?
Yeah,
Whether to take that
I
and to
think we
use
should
it,
take
not
that
use it.
position out. Sorry, Frank, but that's what I think.
So the position is currently filled and funded at the Department of Education. It's the person that does the work and works with the schools on all of the grant requirements. So there's currently somebody at the department that does this work. This is not a new position. Yes, it's funded.
Senator Rosenwald has come.
Thank you. But it's currently a temporary position, right?
Correct.
So it wouldn't eliminate the position, it would just eliminate converting the position?
Tammy, is that correct?
Okay, so the person wouldn't leave necessarily.
As long as we are able to use some of this $5 million to fund that position, that would be correct. Right now, we don't have funding available to continue the position.
So
The
I
amendment will make
apologize,
sure-
I misunderstood. I thought this was a new position. I know it said convert, but I apologize for that. So I don't see any problem with if it's an existing position.
Okay, so Senator Bradley moves $10 million in FY '23 with the appropriate language. And Senator Pearl seconds. And
We're moving it into 23?
3. Yep. And further discussion, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And because we are doing that, it is suggested that we are not going to do 6 because we funded the safety programs through there. Anytime you want to talk, you can tell me. You're happy so far, all right. Further discussion. This will be a no action needed, since the committee to take no action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. No action.
And just to clarify for the committee, you were okay with converting the temporary position to a permanent full-time?
The motion did not have a change to that, yes.
So that, okay,
That
thank you.
was in the motion. Okay, number 7, reduce the tuition, transportation. This is a change, I guess, back to the governor's position. Mickey, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. The House had added $2.2 million per year to this aid program. This item here would reduce it to $9 million, which is what the current year level is, as well as what the governor recommended.
Discussion? Senator Bertzel?
Is this a, kind of a pilot program, a new program?
No, this is our tuition and transportation funding in our CTE programming. Part of the risk associated with the increase that the House made is that it would jeopardize our Perkins funds if that was ever reduced, and if you miss MOE, you miss the whole grant. And so by adding it into this category, it put our maintenance of effort at risk. So we're okay with this change.
Thank you.
Additional comments?
Question.
Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. Do all of the school districts that want to be able to send their kids to CTE programs, are they able to do it under the current funding levels?
So this particular item is not a limiting factor. The limiting factor is really about space and programming is what prevents students from otherwise accessing the programming, but this itself is not the limiting factor.
Follow up?
So why did the House increase this funding?
I think that they believe, and I think that the actual cost associated with the tuition and transportation is probably more than the $9 million. This is the contribution that the state makes towards that. But what we have to be careful of is where that contribution goes, because if that contribution comes into this account, it increases our maintenance of effort level and then potentially puts it at risk in the future. The Perkins grant that we get from the federal funds.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional comments? Since this is a request for reduction, Senator Bradley?
Yeah, no, I move the motion. Second.
Okay, Senator Bradley, Senator Pearl. And all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Okay. Line item number 8. Establishing computer science education program. $4 million in 23 money.
So I'll move the item, this was in the governor's budget at $4.99 million. In speaking with the governor's policy director over the last couple of days, they agreed that the computer science education credentialing initiative could be reduced by that differential, and that they would be pleased with a $4 million appropriation.
Senator Bradley moves, 4 million. Chair will second, since I don't see any other hands popping up. Further discussion? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you. So Commissioner, tell me how this program is going to work.
So there's several different.
Give me the implementation.
Yeah, there are several different components to it, actually. So the computer science professional development component of it is targeted at existing educators to help them to acquire some type of an industry-recognized credential in a computer space that would allow them to teach in our computer science programs in the state. The second is computer science education credential, which is a funding designed to incentivize individuals in the industry to come into the education field and bring their education or their computer science credentials into the education space. There is a component that is an experiential robotics platform, and this is a program that will, there's a new robot platform that's been designed by First Robotics that is an open design that allows students to build components and parts for the robots using 3D printers in their classrooms. And so this would provide starter kits for classrooms for that robotics platform. And so those are the main components associated there.
Okay. Further question? But in the last budget, you transferred robotics money into money to fix the building. So are we behind because of that transfer?
Yeah, so we're not behind. I mean, we did do that transfer, but if you recall, that was funding that would have normally been spent during the pandemic that did not get used for that purpose, and so we had asked for that transfer. But all of our robotics grants since that time are fully subscribed, and we actually end up, turning people away who are interested in some type of robotics grant.
But we didn't spend the money on robotics. We transferred it to building maintenance.
For that period of time during
I got
the
picture.
COVID, right, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. 9 and 10.
Thank
Senator
you.
Bradley.
Given the surplus in the Education Trust Fund and the changes that we've made by putting the formula back to where it is at the existing level and not depleting education programs, the action that we took yesterday and the first agenda item today, it just seems to make sense that we would fund the Winnisquam career education in HB2 as opposed to the capital budget. So it will stay in the capital budget, but this language is just a contingency. It funds it, and if something were to happen to the capital budget, if something were to happen to HB2, then the capital budget would go forward. So it reduces our long-term bonding costs and recognizes the fact that we have surplus,
Commissioner.
and it gets built.
So just to clarify, so I'll take the funding from here first, and if this is unavailable, I go to
correct.
capital. Thank you.
Additional discussion.
Question.
Senator D'Alessandro.
I wonder, Senator, if you've talked with Representative McConkey about this, because this takes the capital budget and reduces it by that money, by $7 million. So we go way under in terms of our capital appropriation. And there were a couple of things that were left out. Does this give us an opportunity to amend the capital budget on the floor to add some of the things that we couldn't fund because of the cost?
I have not had a chance to talk to Representative McConkey, no. There were some things that were left out of the capital budget. We obviously will have the capital budget on the floor on June 7th, and it's obviously open to amendment. What I would say is that it's a finely crafted document. Amendments to it may be good, may not be good, who knows what happens. I just think this is a way to reduce the capital spend where we have the surpluses that we have. And as you recall, and Chairman Innes will recall, that we were somewhat above, I think we were at about 137 million in the capital budget. And the target is 125 million for the bond rating agencies. The treasurer was okay with our overall picture, but this would get us $7.6 million closer to the target that the treasurer and the bond rating agencies always try to have us achieve. So I hadn't really thought about increasing the spend elsewhere. Now, you might. Maybe that's where foster grandparents come. I don't know.
Are you kidding? The foster, they're out in the cold. They're freezing. I would just say that there was a comment when we did the capital budget that something from the seacoast was not brought in time, and it had to do with the construction of the facility there, and it made the facility more acceptable to accepting traffic based on the depth that it was a dredging situation, and the depth of the depth that was considered was not, it wasn't deep enough in order to take vessels.
The pier?
Yeah, it's the dredging underneath the pier. And there were, not that pier. That pier's only 125,000. We'll save that pier for later.
Gentlemen, I think we need to get back to the item.
But the question was, there was a need, and maybe, could we discuss it? I'll talk to McConkey. Thank you.
All right. Is there any further discussion on line item number 8? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Oh,
I moved.
and I seconded.
9.
Oh, we're on 9. Yes, 9 and 10. So we're going to move both of them, right?
Yes.
And who's making the motion?
I'll move it.
Second.
Innes moves, Bradley second. See, I didn't write the count on the first one, so I was off the line. All right. Further discussion on, this is doing both 9 and 10 simultaneously. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And we're on to page 3. Senator D'Alessandro, I'm going to take 12 first before I take 11. I think that's the right order to take.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Well, 12 is always ahead of 11. That's the way I look at it. It's one higher. My amendment deletes the need for the commission and saves us $2.3 million. Right now, it saves us $1 million because the commission's already, there's a commission already in place for civics, and participated in the development of the language for the civics bill that's running through the House and the Senate at this point in time. And I've been a proponent of civics in this body for the last 20 years. So I think the commission that's established does a good job, and I don't see why we need to spend $1 million on another commission. I mean, we've got both of them doing the same things, and we've got very competent, capable people on the commission as we speak. And that's why I think we can save ourselves $1 million. Now we can save $1 million rather than the $2 million.
Okay, Senator D'Alessandro moves the item, and seconded by Senator Rosenwald. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. The nays have it. And we'll take up 11. This is the $1 million that the Senator talked about for the civics education program. Discussion, Senator Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the original proposal was for $2 million to this commission for the purpose of creating an updated New Hampshire textbook on civics. One of the biggest proponents of that is former Congressman Chuck Douglas, who we all know. He approached me maybe 3 weeks ago and said that if we funded it for $1 million, that they would be able to create an updated civics textbook, so that's why I moved the item.
Senator D'Alessandro, excuse me, Senator Bradley moves the item.
Second.
Seconded by Dan. Senator Ennis.
That works.
Thank you.
Works for me too.
When I read the original item in the governor's budget, it looked like the commission itself was going to create a textbook, but knowing that none of you are teachers or writers or illustrators, should we understand that you would hire, this commission would hire some company to create the textbook?
So it was my understanding that we would be contracting with someone to assist in that work, some experts in that field.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you. I began teaching civics at the high school level in 1961. I taught Bill Gardner civics. I taught Gene Chandler civics. I taught the person who owns the Common Man Restaurants civics. I think we did a pretty good job of teaching civics. If we got a Speaker of the House, we got a Secretary of State, longest serving Secretary of State in the history of the country. We did a pretty good job. We had textbooks in those days. They were pretty good textbooks. I don't see why we have to write new textbooks. Civics has not changed. Efficacy has changed. We're unethical today where we were more ethical in 1961. That's what I'm saying clearly. And just look at the ads that we're seeing on television as we speak. We don't have to spend $1 billion based on Chuck Douglas's comments. I don't think Chuck ever taught civics. Now, I understand he was Mel Thompson's legal counsel. I went to college with Chuck Douglas. He was Mel Thompson's legal counsel. He became a Superior Court judge. He became a Supreme Court judge. He resigned from the court to pursue a more lucrative profession in the law. I understand that. And kudos to Chuck. He's done a lot of good things. We got his picture in room 100 on the wall. And that's pretty good when you get your picture on the wall when you're still alive. You know, he's a living. We don't need $1 million to build a new textbook. There are many good books available. We could save $1 million. $1 million that we can spend someplace else. Maybe the foster grandparents program can be resurrected. But I don't see why we have to create a new textbook. I've taught at Franklin Pierce University. I've taught at St. Anselm College. I've taught at Southern New Hampshire University. I've taught state and local governments. I've used current materials. I think they're adequate. I just don't believe we need to spend $1 million to get a new book. You can consult me, and I'll do it for nothing. I'll offer my services.
I wondered if that's
How's that?
where you were going.
All right. Senator Rosenwald.
Is $1 million enough to contract with a textbook company to create a new textbook and distribute it to all of the students in New Hampshire? Is that really enough?
So I don't know the answer to that, and we would obviously work through an RFP process to make that work. I think the only thing that I would tell you, and I agree with Senator D'Alessandro, that there is a lot of quality content that's available in the marketplace. And so really a lot of this effort will be directed not at the origination of the quality content so much as creating it in a 21st century accessible way, right? So the students today are used to engaging in video content and multimedia content. And so what will happen is we'll take the rich content from our history and be able to bring it into a pedagogy that would, kind of be more effective probably in the current environment. And that's how I assumed that this would flow.
Follow-up, Senator? I guess not. All right, further discussion. Okay, we have a motion and a second on this item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Yay.
And the ayes have it. We've been asked to call the roll.
Senator Bradley,
Yes.
Senator Gray,
Yes?
Senator Ennis,
Yes.
Senator Rosenbaum. No. Senator Pearl,
Yes.
Senator Bertzel,
No.
Senator D'Alessandro.
No.
And the ayes have it. Okay, moving on to item number 13. This is Amendment 1768, deletes sections and saves us $250,000. Further comments from the senators? Do I have a motion?
So moved. I moved. No, you did? Second.
Senator Ennis, I heard you first. Senator Bradley seconds. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. 14. Amendment 1770, payment for episodes of treatment. And I guess, Mickey, we'll let you talk first. And
Yeah,
then-
I think I don't have much more to add. This was an amendment added by House Finance. And the amounts appropriated here are in House Bill 1, they're general funds, based on estimates provided by the Department of Health and Human Services at the time. And I would defer to the department on any specifics.
Commissioner.
So I just want to explain, my understanding of how this works, and I believe there's some folks from HHS here if we need further clarification. But essentially, this is something that came out of changes that were made when we implemented the Fast Forward program. So we now have the ability when individuals are having mental health types of crisis for us to deploy to them or for them to get a more immediate response. And so what happens is, in that process, there would likely be some type of a voluntary committal to some type of a program or residential type of a program that requires cost. And so it's a little bit akin to my court-ordered placements, except for there's not a court order here. There is a working with the Fast Forward program, mental health teams, and to be able to place a student or another adult. I'm concerned mostly about the students, and to be able to continue to pay for their services. I'll give you an example that happened that we're working today even. So I have a student in one of our communities who has a number of mental health difficulties resulting in frequent encounters with law enforcement. This week there's been 3 law enforcement encounters just because the individual endangers the family, endangers someone around them. They had a fast forward experience. Through that process, we're trying to place that student at one of our special education facilities. The difficulty is this student lives in one community. He has an IEP. This IEP does not call for a placement in this facility. The facility is in another school district. So I now have a student who's trying to get placed in a school district. That school district is saying, well, it's not my child, so we can't be financially responsible for this student's education. The district is saying, well, the student doesn't have in their IEP a call to be in this placement setting, so they're not able to use their IDEA funds or their special education funds to pay for this. But yet, working through HHS, this is probably the right placement for the student at this point in time, given their danger to themselves and to the community around them. And so the question that we're wrestling with is, how do we fund this student's placement in this setting? Because as an education setting, so at the department, I don't have those types of funds. The school district isn't able to use their typical IDEA type funds because it's not part of an IEP. the district where the student shows up is saying, well, it's not my child, he lives in another community, so who's going to pay for it? And so the objective here with these episodes of treatment was to treat them similar to a court-ordered placement, whereby when a student is working through HHS placed in some type of a setting, that HHS and the Bureau of Children and Behavioral Health will pay for the healthcare related costs, but the education costs would fall then to the department like a court order placement, then we would be able to support those education costs. Sorry if that was too complicated.
Senator Bradley, but before Senator Bradley actually starts to talk, who's here from Health and Human Services? Would you come up and sit over here next to Mickey? So that
And
you
she
can
might
get the
need to
microphone?
correct anything that I've gotten incorrect.
Again, I'm trying to keep this. All right, Senator Bradley?
So I guess this would be a question to both departments. My understanding was that these costs were already being absorbed by the Department of Health and Human Services.
Department.
Good morning. For the record, Rebecca Ross, the Director of the Bureau for Children's Behavioral Health. The department is covering some of these costs for education for individuals who need an episode of behavioral health treatment in a residential setting. However, as folks saw, we had to ask for additional money just to cover funds this year at the last fiscal meeting because we were not budgeted for education costs. And so similar to when DCYF has a youth who needs treatment, we were looking to have this statute match that the education is covered by education and not out of the funds that are identified as to be used for healthcare. Otherwise, we can't serve the population we need to serve.
Senator Bradley.
So what are the costs that the department has absorbed for this in the past? I mean, what have you budgeted for this?
Previously, we've budgeted for residential treatment as a whole. We never had an appropriation or a budgeted line item for educational expenses. We've been covering those in the whole daily rate. Otherwise, these children and youth would have not been able to receive the treatment that they needed, which was also impairing their education. So we did get some math to Mickey earlier this session. I apologize, I don't have that with me. I had about 5 minutes notice. I was on my way to Hampstead Hospital for the PRTF opening, which would be one of these facilities. We can get you those, but we are seeing increasing costs as we're seeing more individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities moving into our system that is truly intended for mental health. So we've budgeted zero, we've spent millions, and we're seeing that going up substantially as kids' needs aren't being met.
Okay, so even though you haven't budgeted, you have spent, there must be a savings then for the Department of Health and Human Services if we transfer these costs to the Department of Education.
I'd be reluctant to say there's going to be a savings because just within the Bureau for Children's Behavioral Health, we have 20 youth who've been approved and are awaiting placement with the workforce issues. We have not been able to get kids into all of the placements that they need. And additionally, as we're moving kids away from the juvenile justice system and the court child protection system, we're seeing costs shift, but we're not able to meet everyone's needs right now. So I'd be reluctant to say there's going to be a savings. We're just going to be better able to meet the needs of the youth in our communities.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I'd be really concerned about doing this, given the strain on our behavioral health system. We know there are kids who can't get out of Hampstead Hospital because there aren't the step-down places. We have increased the funding in House Bill 2 for that, but I think it's going to take a while to work its way through the system. We've also heard there's like up to a 4-month waiting list to get community mental health center treatment. I know we've had some children taking their own lives recently, and I think we're playing with fire here.
All right, just so that you know what I'm going to do, we're at least going to let both the Republicans and Democrats caucus on this. We're going to take a recess at the end of this packet before we go into the next packet. So I want to get as much of the discussion done right now as we can. But I will put this one on hold, and my caucus will discuss it during the recess. Senator D'Alessandro, you asked to be recognized.
Just a query. We had a 14-year-old boy jump off of a bridge and kill himself in Manchester last week. 14 years old, student at Southside. I was driving, this is a couple of years ago, I was driving down the highway and I saw one jump off the bridge and kill himself in Manchester. So I've witnessed one suicide, and I've read about the other one. 14-year-old kid. That kid had to be emotionally disturbed. There's something radically wrong. It seems to me that in our current environment, the number of youngsters, we're addressing that through a creation of a new place associated with Hampstead, but with the number of kids, we got social workers in schools now handling these problems. There have to be emotional problems, and if you don't have an appropriation to deal with it, how does it get dealt with? If you have one in one school and one in another, neither one wants to pay. Nobody wants to pay. So what happens to the kid? Where does the kid end up? Jumping off a bridge and killing himself? Is that what's going to happen? Look, when I was teaching, the suicide rate in New Hampshire was 20% above the national average. It's been that way for a long period of time. That's exacerbating as we speak. We're seeing kids killing themselves in our schools. I don't know how we face this. How do you face this issue? Well, we don't have enough money here, and we're not going to appropriate money here, but we're building a new building to take care of kids who are so dramatic that they need special attention. What are we spending there? We spent $13 million to buy Hampstead Hospital. We're going to spend another $12 million to build this facility. And here we're discussing not to put funds in to take care of kids. Does that make any sense? I don't think so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator, comment from the chair here. One of the things that I'm getting out of this conversation is that the Department of Education may not feel that this is the proper place for that funding. It may be better in Health and Human Services to be funded there. But again, I'm also told that there is a retained bill in the House that can be used to take care of the situation, but I need to get the money right. And I'll give both the department and the commissioner a chance to comment on my comments.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. I mean, I think I agree. It doesn't really, from my perspective, if we're all working together and we're coordinating a child's healthcare and their educational needs, which pot of money it sits in is not the issue to me. It's that both the school and the behavioral health providers have the tools they need to collaborate, and we don't have barriers that even if a child needs intense psychiatric treatment, if that particular treatment isn't currently in their IEP because something has changed, that there's no flexibility or ability to meet that youth's needs in that time, and they have to wait for a year to have their IEP updated. So if the money is in one pot or the other, I'm much more concerned about the collaboration and the schools being empowered to work with kids who need behavioral health treatment at that intense level.
Commissioner.
And so I would just say as well, we don't really think that there's something special about which pot it goes in. What we do know is that we have, state and federal requirements that we provide an education to these students, irrespective of the setting that they find themselves in. We're trying to find a mechanism by which we can actually do that and not allow the students to get caught in this donut hole between two districts deciding who's going to kick in what. We just want to make sure that the students are taken care of.
Senator Birdsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So from what you had said, the IEP didn't cover the cross training or the cross from one school district to another. can't those IEPs be renegotiated to include that? And where does that money come from?
Yeah, so certainly the IEP team is able to meet, and then they could say like, okay, based on this meeting, we think that this is an appropriate, placement for the child. But you have to keep in mind that the IEP team is meeting and they're trying to determine educational need for that child. So that if, they might say like, we can meet the child's educational needs here in this setting, but if the child needs a placement in some psychiatric facility, then it wouldn't fit within that IEP. So you have the combination of there's a time lag. Fast Forward responds quickly, which is really, my experience so far has been that the Fast Forward program is responding to crisis needs in families relative to mental health, but they're going to act at that moment, and then I'm going to have, even if I can update the IEP, I have a gap, and I need somebody to cover that gap. And then, depending on where that placement goes, it may be inappropriate to include that in the IEP during this episode of treatment. And so we need to cover it during that period of time, and then they have an episode of treatment, they're treated, they're stabilized, they're able to come back into their community, and then we will continue on with those services. So it's really, we're dealing with, that's why it's referred to as kind of episode of treatment. These aren't all necessarily a permanent placement.
Okay. Seeing no other hands, this item is on hold until after the recess. 15. Medicaid direct certification.
So this amendment here would delete section 380 relative to having the department move forward with applying for Medicaid direct certification, and also delete sections 435 and 434 and 435 relative to expanding the eligibility of a free meal in schools based on income, and establishes a study committee to review all F&R related issues. The amounts that you see are reflective of what the House had added associated to moving forward with direct cert, as well as establishing a position in the nutrition area.
Questions, comments? Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you. What's the estimate of the number of children that are eligible by nature of being on Medicaid but are not signed up for free and reduced meals? Is it like 7,000?
I believe 9,000.
9,000. So it's a lot of students who are eligible, but their families haven't enrolled them.
Possibly. I think the raw numbers, I think we had resident data for ages 5 to 18-year-olds by town, and I think it was approximately 20,000 more than the F&R count, but we're not sure how many are in district schools and how many would. So it is kind of a tough estimate to make. For the models that we had moving forward, I think we had around 9,000 assumed would come on board with direct cert starting in fiscal 26 for adequacy purposes.
Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much. It's my amendment, and the whole point of this amendment is we're looking at potentially very significant costs with direct certification, and I can't remember the number of the bill. I think it was maybe House Bill 572, which the Senate, on a bipartisan basis, referred for study, as I recall. It was even on the consent calendar. There was a $75 million fiscal note on increasing free and reduced lunch costs. And if you add up the $75 million and the estimates that we got from Ms. Davis as to what direct certification could mean, even though it's not in the next 2-year education appropriation, it's in the range of $22 to $30 million. So you're looking at potentially $100 million of spend. I think before we do that, we ought to have a commission that really looks at it, and knowing that there is nothing that precludes any parent or child from signing up for free and reduced lunch. They have to do something as opposed to the direct certification. So it's not as if kids that are in need of free and reduced lunch are ineligible. That's not the case. They are. The other thing that I think needs to be noted is that the fiscal committee raised the SNAP level in September, I believe it was, from 185% of poverty to 200% of poverty. There hasn't been a significant uptake in that so far. Now, there may be in the future, but again, that's why this is part of the study commission item. I think that, you know, the fact that we've made a really good faith commitment to funding adequacy and education shows what, you know, on a bipartisan basis, this committee wants to do. But I think that before we potentially put ourselves on the hook for, between the two initiatives, what could be $100 million, we should really think long and hard and have a study committee and get, you know, all the numbers and facts and figures. So I would hope we would support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Additional comments? Seeing none, Senator Bradley moves.
Second?
Senator Ennis seconds. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. 16. Amendment deletes section establishing funding for academic research and improvement performance data analysis position. Comments?
I move the item.
Senator Birdsell moves the item, seconded by
Second?
Senator Ennis. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. 17, funding for contracting with the National Student Clearinghouse. I'm not in favor of taking any action on this item, so any further? Since the committee, all those in favor of taking no action say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Um, 18. 18, what I'm told is that there are problems with the wording of the bill that may cause us problems in the future. Mickey, you're shaking your head. I'll let you speak.
So sections 424 to 433 would incorporate charter public schools into the school building aid program. If you recall, there was a bill that's actually been signed by the governor relative to the school building aid application process. So those underlying laws are changed at this point from what you have here in House Bill 2 that are being amended relative to charter schools. This also aligns with a bill that is retained currently in House Education, as the House was still working on some of the specifics of adding charter schools, some of the complications around that with the Department of Education. As far as if you want additional information, I would defer to the commissioner, or Caitlin would probably have additional info as well.
Commissioner.
So that's correct. So in House Bill 452, there were some process changes made to the building aid process, and that included the incorporation of the public charter schools into that. The language in the proposed House Bill 2 would undo that, and so this would correct that so that you don't have two bills conflicting with one another. And it would carry forward the policy in 452 that improved the process.
Further discussion? Motion. Senator Pearl moves.
Second?
Seconded by Senator Ennis. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. All right. 19.
Item 19 is the language from Senate Bill 140, which is currently tabled relative to establishing a program for educator recruitment in New Hampshire. That bill had appropriated general funds. This amendment would allow for the identification of available ARPA or ESSER dollars, and the department could seek those through the normal fiscal and governor and council process.
Further comments? Senator Rosenwald.
Is it still understanding that there are no available ARPA funds that haven't been appropriated?
Senator Bradley?
My understanding is, and sitting on fiscal as you do, that there still are the possibility of funds coming back that haven't been expended, and there is some small amount of money, is my understanding, that's still available. So I'm trying to pull up the bill actually as we speak, but.
Well, while you're doing that, Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand, again, to carry on with what Senator Brown said, we haven't got a full accounting of the ARPA funds. Actually, we don't even have a full accounting of the COVID money. And there is a claw, as the federal government is speaking, they're talking about clawback provisions for both the COVID money and the ARPA money as part of this package that deals with the deficit. So we ought to know how much money's available. And if we do that, then fiscal obviously could reallocate that money. But it seems to me, until we know that, this situation can't be dealt with, or shouldn't be dealt with, because we don't want to say go search for our funds when they don't exist. You know, and if we can give you a base of what's left there, then it would seem to be we give you a charge, go get it because it's there. I don't want to give you a charge that says go after air.
Commissioner? You pulled the mic over. That was the signal.
Well, I wasn't sure if I was going to need to have a question posed to me. There wasn't a specific question in there, but I mean, we're happy to pursue any kind of funding options that are available. I will point out that relative to the education fundings, if you go to my website, there's a full accounting and that's updated in real time in terms of how all those funds are being used. And relative to the ARPA funds, one of the things I can say relative to those funding is, you know, they've been allocated out to various programs. Ultimately, many times these programs don't use all the funds and they return and they need to get reallocated. This would be a good item for reallocation because it could be deployed relatively quickly. It's not a significant amount of money. So having the option to be able to pursue these ARPA funds is probably a good option.
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
And that option would be given credibility if you do the dollars were there. I think, and that's the key, knowing how much is left and how much has been recouped that hasn't been spent. And that's a key item.
Back to Senator Bradley.
Yeah, I just was able to look up the bill. It was Senator Carson's bill. There was an appropriation for $5 million. Quite frankly, I think we're going to spend another $5 million. It would go to the mental health program that we just discussed. So I think it's a good program. I think the way that we're proposing to fund it works, and I think the commissioner is right. I mean, I know that there will be some unexpended ARPA funds that come back, and if it's readily deployed, I think this is the way to go.
I agree with that.
Okay, so it sounds like I have a motion from Senator Bradley and a second from Senator D'Alessandro. Is that correct? Correct. All right. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Item 20. I want to hold on that till Tuesday, but if there's discussion, we'll take it.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the commissioner was here to present the budget, we did have discussion about the change in the federal funding formula for adult education. And that change has meant less money going to the centers in Salem, Exeter, Concord, Nashua, and Dover, I believe, because it changed from how many students you had to what kind of barriers they had. So he told us at the time that if he had an appropriation, and I'd like to ask him about it, he could get that money out to the centers that are losing money. I know that in the Nashua Center, for example, it's a combination of people whose native language is not English, but have professions they've come to the country with, and non-high school graduates as well. And if the new Americans could speak better English and the non-high school graduates had GEDs, they could join the workforce right away. So I look at this as a workforce enhancer, and I ask the commissioner.
So happy to comment on that. So it is true that over the past couple of years, we're trying to adjust the way that the funding was allocated historically to match the federal requirements for the grant so that we have better compliance relative to how we push those funds out. But it is simultaneously true that our program is expanding mostly in the the young adult population who is going there. I think I shared with you last time that we've got 1,700 high school students that participate in our adult education programming. There are new American programs. There are individuals who are upscaling their capacity, which is really the objective of this. So we feel like we could effectively deploy additional funds. In my own budget request, I had asked for additional funds because of the expansion, particularly at the high school level. The only thing I would ask is that perhaps, and Cindy or Senator Rosenwald, we didn't have a chance to talk about this beforehand, but the way that this is funded with these one-time funds that my CFOs just whispered in my ear may cause an MOE issue because it's one-time money. So in other words, like it increases and then it goes away. So we may just need to confer about how to push this through the budgeting process to not create an MOE problem if that's possible.
Comment, Senator?
Hope you have a suggestion.
We will try and bring something for you, yes.
Would look like.
Yeah.
Senator Bradley?
Sorry.
Okay. Further discussion? All right, this item is on hold till Tuesday. Item 21 was a suggestion from department. I'm not inclined to take action on it. Is anybody? Senator Bradley?
Yeah, no, my suggestion would be that probably has merit. I think the commissioner would be well advised to bring in a bill next year to accomplish this.
Maybe not Charlie, but.
Okay. With that, we take no action, the sense of the committee to do that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. All right, so before we start packet 2, I'm going to take a recess. If anybody wants a longer recess than 10, 15 minutes, then we were trying to get you out of here earlier today so that you could beat whatever traffic you can beat. So with that, we will be in recess for 10 minutes. Okay. We'll call the committee back to order. We want to go packet 1, page 3, line 14.
Mr. Chair? So,
Senator Bratton.
I know that we were on hold. I would make a motion that we move the entire amount of funding into 2023, which I believe the legislative budget assistant thinks is very appropriate. And since it's going to the Department of Education, it should be an education trust fund item. So that would be my motion.
Support that, yeah.
Okay.
And I would add that I'm glad that the departments, both HHS and DOE, were here. There was a lot of new information that came online, and my understanding is that this funding was already being funded elsewhere, so that's why I didn't think it was necessary, because it was already being funded. But clearly, the discussion this morning shows that it should be, and that's how we should do it. 23 ETF. And yeah, with all the traditional non-lapsing language.
Since it's coming out of the Education Trust Fund and it is already non-lapsing, right? We don't have to worry about it?
We'll make sure it's clearly non-lapsing appropriation in '23, it will be expended in '24, '25, and we will also make the necessary House Bill 2 changes to have the episodic treatment be an allowable use for education trust funds. So we'll make those technical changes as well to align with the committee's intent here.
I know this is the first you're hearing of that, so I want to give you a minute to think about it. Senator Rosenbaum?
I think it's great.
All right.
We like that.
Okay.
Well, I hope Senator Bradley will think that way about my foster grandparents. That's all, that's all.
Aren't we going out for lunch?
Amen.
We are going out for dinner, and I'm taking you. I
Whoa.
am taking you.
Whoa.
I'm gonna spend the bulk of the $100 I earned on you, Senator Bradley, 'cause you deserve it, you deserve it.
And with that promise, is there any further, I think I've lost control, but I'll get it back. Line 14, all right? We've got a committee amendment, moves the money into 23, moves it to the Education Trust Fund, and appropriate language in both House Bill 1 and 2 to make all that happen. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and we're finished with packet 1.
And just to clarify, so those sections in House Bill 2 will not be deleted. They will be maintained. That amendment will be replaced by the committee amendment that you just discussed.
Understood. Packet 2. All right, we've got 2 items for justice. If you want to put your amendment forward first, Senator, we'll do that. Line item number 1.
Yes, please, I'd like to move Amendment 1663S.
Senator Rosenbaum moves the amendment 1663. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Senator D'Alessandro. Discussion.
Yes, thank you. So we met with the administrator, retired Justice Broderick, who was chosen by the Attorney General to administer this fund. He told us there were 2 things we could do that he thought would bring more of the litigants into the fund. And they're about 1,300, maybe somewhere between 800 and 1,300. The 2 things he told us he thought would be helpful were, 1, to move the waiver process further back, and 2, to allow the Attorney General and the Administrator to have discretion to raise the cap. Now, we know that recently, there was a settlement made, and it was made by the Attorney General, not by the Administrator, at the cap level of $1.5 million. I'm mindful that to hit the cap, you basically have to have been raped 10 times and maybe within less than a year. If you're at either the Sununu Center or one of its predecessors for longer than a year, you don't get as much money. So if the rapes occurred over a longer period of time, you would actually qualify for less money. I know there's been discussion that some members think it's too early to make a change to that we should wait until next year. But I'm concerned that if we wait until next year, if a similar kind of a case comes forward and there is a decision made to raise the cap, what happens to the claimant who settled for $1.5 million for the same horrific treatment at the hands of the state? Do we go back and renegotiate with that person? I just think it's late to wait another year, which is what I've heard discussion of. So I think we should listen to the guy who's administering the fund and move forward with this amendment.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to reiterate everything that Senator Rosenwald said. It's quite clear and it's succinct. But I think two things happened that I think are imperative. Number one, we had not only one conversation, but a subsequent conversation with the administrator and people on his staff. Secondly, we met with Senator Bradley and went over this with Senator Bradley and asked him to touch base with the Attorney General so that we would have a nice symbiotic relationship here, that everybody was on the same page and working towards the ultimate end. And the end is taking care of these claimants and doing it efficiently, effectively, and fairly. And the items that were suggested by the administrator have been run by the Attorney General. And I think he agreed, basically, with the basic format. So it seems to me, as we kind of move these things forward, and we want cases settled. I believe someone said there were about 30 of them that they're now talking about as we speak. They've settled the one big one. That's the one that we know of. But I think they've settled others through this process. The administrator believes that by doing this, it'll expedite the process. More people will come to him and will have discussions with him. And he's given some latitude here. We here know the seriousness of this situation. This involves our state, the credibility of our state, the credibility of a part of our government that didn't live up to what they were supposed to do. They just did not live up to every expectation that we had when we sent those kids to the Sununu Center. So I think it's important. All of the bases have been covered. It isn't a question of doing something that everybody wasn't aware of. The AG is aware, the administrator is aware, we made the Senate President aware, and we had conversations with both the administrator and his staff. That's transparency at its highest degree. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I should have said before that the reason the administrator recommended also making provision for raising the cap is he believes that unless we do that, the litigants, the plaintiff's attorneys who are handling most of the cases will counsel them to stay out of the fund. And in the end, at the end of 2024, when the fund application closes, the court system will be overwhelmed by actual court cases, and our budget for the Department of Justice will also be blown up. and will end up traumatizing again more people who went through the system and were victimized. So he had good reasons for recommending that we do this. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everything that my colleagues have said. Can't disagree with that this might be necessary down the road. I think it is premature, and that's why the Attorney General doesn't support it. And I think that there is agreement on sections 1, 4, and 5 of your amendment, which we'll consider in theory in a subsequent amendment. But I think that the process is still very young, and it should be given a little bit more time to work. If Justice Broderick and Attorney General Formella in January feel that, you know, this change or something in between 1.5 and I think it's about 4.75 million, which would be the state cap, is warranted. I think we proved in early this session that we're able to move the new Sununu Center or the new Youth Development Center legislation pretty quickly. So I think that it could move and it could move quickly, but I think until the Attorney General is you know, fully on board with it, I can't support it. And I think, you know, as we have looked at the all the things that, you know, we're trying to do, from the pay raise to education funding to Medicaid provider rates to housing to childcare, where we're putting significant, you know, resources into it, I think justifiably so. At the same time, we also have to be aware of, you know, what the outcome of this process is and how it affects the rainy day fund, where, you know, we've deposited money to pay for this. And I think most observers think that $100 million, which is, you know, dedicated to that cause in the rainy day fund, is, at the end of the day, may not be enough. But I think that we also have to, you know, understand that we have a long-term liability here. We have to manage it as well as we possibly can, and I'd be much more supportive of something like this when the Attorney General, who brought forward, quite frankly, the settlement process legislation, has signed on to it. So with that, I would ask that we defeat this amendment and move to my amendment, which just adopts sections 1, 4, and 5.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. So this amendment does not increase the amount of money in the fund. I think the administrator and probably the Attorney General and everybody else thinks that either we're going to have to someday put more money here, or we're going to face costs in the judicial branch and the Department of Justice that are 5 times as big. When the Attorney General came to, I think it was the fiscal committee that approved the settlement fund, maybe it wasn't, it's a hazy memory, he told us that he expected the average maximum payout to be between $600,000 and $700,000. And he actually designed his table of multipliers and additions to come in about 40% lower than the cap. So this whole fund is designed to undercompensate victims to an extent. So the fact that we already settled one for the maximum cap, I can't even imagine what that individual went through. So I don't think it blows up the budget, and I hope we'll adopt it and would ask for a roll call.
Further discussion? Seeing none, call the roll.
No.
No?
No.
Yes.
No.
And the nays have it. Taking a motion on line 2. Senator Bradley moves.
Second?
Second by Senator Ennis. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Moving on to environmental services. There is a typo or a word that we need to take out. I think it's in your packet, it's page 10 of the packet. The first word in that line, advisory,
35, line 30.
line 35.
Okay.
To the council having jurisdiction over, that shouldn't be advisory in there.
Got it.
We can draft a committee amendment for that.
Okay?
So,
Is there-
Senator Gray, this was, well, it's in the beginning of HB2, I think it's sections 18 through 25 that made changes to several environmental council, the wetlands council, the solid waste council. And so I heard from, a couple of the councils that just felt it was going a little too far. And I asked the commissioner of the department to negotiate with those folks. This is what they've come up with that one change to strike the word advisory, which I think was inadvertently left in the language on page 10, line 35. So the bottom line, I think it's a result of a collaborative process, and if the Department of Environmental Services wishes to make further changes, I think that absolutely should be the subject of its own standalone legislation.
Further discussion?
Move the item.
Seeing none, Senator Birdsall moves the item, seconded by the chair. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The next item, Medicaid services. This is going to be a hold till Tuesday. Are any of the senators wanting to comment before we move to the next? Division of Behavioral Health. Both items 1 and 2 are hold till Tuesday. Do any of the senators have comments before we do that? Okay, miscellaneous items, top of page 2. Amendment 2028, extending the sunset relative to recruitment and retention programs for the state employment.
Senator D'Alessandro might recognize this. This was your bill? I think it was Senate Bill 226 from a couple of years ago. It's actually worked out pretty well, and my understanding is that there are dollars left that without this date moving forward would not be able to be expended on this purpose.
Senator D'Alessandro, since it's your bill, would you like to be the one who makes the motion?
I would love it.
Okay, seconded by
I've been able to do it.
Seconded by Senator Birdsall. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the ayes have it. Line item number 2. Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it came to my attention about a month or so ago of the situation that was going on in the Northwood Meadow Lake Park with their dam. And what's happened is they had a problem 2 or 3 years back where there was an issue with the spillway and they had to lower the water level. Well, when that occurred, it took out a good chunk of the lake. It also took away the disability access to the fishing docks that were there and required Fish and Game to stop stocking that pond with trout because there wasn't activity enough and water enough to support it. So they've now been able to get a plan together where they believe they're just about done with their final work on the design and engineering of it. And so I've come back and asked for $1 million. They're gonna come in around 1.2 or 1.3 million, but they have enough of money in their budget already that they can cover the additional portion. So the $1 million ask will allow them to get this dam in, and they are very comfortable that they can get it done in 25, maybe tight to get it done in fiscal year 25, but they'll have it done in 25 so the funds can be committed. So I'm asking the committee to support this amendment so that we can get this gem that's in Northwood back online. And it's a free park to the public, and it's enjoyed by many. I'd like to get it back online as soon as possible. Appreciate your support.
Senator Pearl moves, Senator Ennis seconds.
I do.
Further discussion, Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a series of dams that are under discussion. There are 3 dams in Goffstown that are under discussion. I'm sure there are others because there are hundreds of dams that fall into this category around the state. This should be a capital appropriation, to be honest with you. We gave a lot of money to dams, I think it was a couple of sessions ago, to repair dams. We gave precedence to the Ossipee Dam because that was so important, and we restructured that. Some of these dams do produce power, some of them don't, some of them are for luxury. There's a situation that's developing in my district where I have 3 dams. One is in another district and 2 are in my district. These dams are currently producing power, but the people who run the dams are not going to re-up. Mm-hmm. They're not going to re-up. So the onus for the dams is going to fall upon the municipalities. And that's costly. If you're going to repair them, it's costly because you're going to have to put fish ladders in. That's an important situation. And there are structural improvements that must happen in the dams. I have great empathy for this situation. I know how important they are. But indeed, when we do this, we're opening the door for the other communities who need help and whose dams are failing and who have built up homes around the lakes that have been created. That water is going to be receding. The property is not going to have the value that it did in the past. The power companies aren't going to renew because it doesn't produce enough power. If you have to put the fish ladder in and you have to repair the dam, that's $1 billion, billions of dollars. I think we're opening Pandora's box here. So we have to be I think we have to be cautious. We have to be very cautious about this. And as I said, I recognize the effect on people. I certainly do. But this is going to have an effect on a lot of people because there are a lot of dams around the state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bertzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have talked to someone in your district, and she had notified me that DES was not going in, and they're now saying they're not going to repair the bridges. I was going to work on something for next year or next session, if you want to work with me on that. Okay.
Senator Rosenwald.
Question of Senator Pearl, if I.
Senator.
So I think I heard you say the department thought they could get it done during 2025. But I'm just looking at the drafting and it'll lapse on June 30th on 2025.
So thank you for the question. They're unsure if they can get it done by July 1st of 2025, but it will be completed in 25. So they can have the funds committed. I'm not certain if that creates an issue with the lapsing on 2025 or not. That's what.
Is anyone here from the department?
I couldn't understand you, Senator. What,
Is there anyone here from?
natural and cultural, I don't see anybody.
But Mike Hoffman's
LBA.
here.
I can tell you that once they have the appropriation and they enter into contracts, if the money's committed to a contract, it wouldn't lapse.
That was my understanding, but thank you for clarifying it.
Okay. We have a motion by Senator Pearl, seconded by Senator Ennis. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. No. And the ayes have it. Item number 3, Senator Ennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an amendment that will provide $3 million to the university system dedicated to Keene State University and Plymouth State University. Both institutions have had financial struggles for the last several years. The system has backfilled a lot of the losses that have occurred at those institutions. These funds are designed to help get both of these colleges, well, one college, one university, moving forward over the next couple of years. But let me say that this is an ongoing issue that has to be more aggressively addressed by the system or some other mechanism, whatever that may be. And I'm committing right here today to working with the system and other interested educational entities, senators, representatives, governors, and so on, to get after this next year and to find a long-term solution to the budget situation that faces both Keene and Plymouth State, as well as the university system.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think nobody's more committed, and I hate to say that, to public higher education. I've spent my life in the business as an administrator, as a teacher, and so forth. Let's look at the institutions. They desperately need help. Keene State has gone from 5,000 students to 2,500 students. That's a 50% decrease in enrollment. The line says that those graduating from high school are falling by 10%. So as time goes forward, you got a 10% pool out there to draw from, and how many are you going to Keene? In the past, Keene has depended on out-of-state students. That's been their draw. And they went from a normal school to a teacher's college, now to Keene State College. What can they do between Keene and Plymouth? What can they do? Plymouth's got some dormitory problems. They got to fix those up. Those are HEFA bonds. So they're self-amortizing. The proceeds from the kids living in those homes are committed to paying for those homes. I don't know what the situation physically is at Keene State, but both of these entities are suffering problems. And you teach at the university, so you know. I want to keep the universities open, obviously. They're a jewel in the post-secondary education area for New Hampshire, so we got to keep them going. Again, the question always is, what's the plan going forward to address this situation?
Yes.
And how does that happen?
Yep. And I think
Senator.
that's the key point, Senator. We need a plan. We need something that shows us that the system knows where they're going with these institutions and they're going to get it done. Neither one has a strong niche right now. It is my opinion as a business person and a professor and a former dean that these institutions need to find something they do better than anyone else and drive that. But that's a discussion for another day. Right now, I think this gets us to that next day. Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Is it still your intention that this money be used for tuition reduction?
The original draft of the amendment included that language. This does not, because simply reducing tuition doesn't solve the budget problem. You're reducing tuition for the students, but that doesn't provide any net funds to the university system to address the budget crater that exists this year. Yes.
And further comment on that this money is a direct result of the requests from the university system for specific items at Keene and at Plymouth. Although the bill doesn't mention that, that's what they have promised. And as your representative on the UNH Board of Trustees, I will keep a watch. Yes, I will. Senator Birdsell, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. How will we be guaranteed that the UNH will match the funds?
Again, Senator Birdsall, you know, as the Senate's representative on the Board of Trustees, I will take that on myself.
Okay.
Further discussion on this item? Let's see, we have Senator Innes has moved it. Senator D'Alessandro, would you like to second this $3 million? You'd like to second it. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And item 4, adjusting the lapse due to the changes that we made in the positions. Mickey?
So this year we would make a adjustment to the lapse estimate on the surplus days, which essentially would free up $7.5 million over the back of the net appropriations.
Further discussion? Chair moves the item.
Second.
Seconded by Senator Birdsall. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The last item on the page authorizes LBA to make the technical changes. The chair will move that one also. Seconded by Senator Rosenwald. Discussion? We're seeing no discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And the ayes have it. Tuesday's gonna be a long day. Hope not, but, you know, I fear it will.
We're supposed to be in Nashville at 5:15.
And we'll do our best. We do have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday, should we get, you know, to a point where we have to have, thank you, Senator Pearl, I don't want to do that. No, he said we should limit debate, and we have tried, in this committee, we have tried to make sure everyone had an ample opportunity to express their opinions. So, Tuesday, we're gonna go through everything again. Please, I know that there is a couple of other things that people are playing with, gaming. We've had a lot of pushback on the executive powers, but I don't see that happening. There's some other things. Believe me, we'll get there. Again, just, you know, keep me informed if there's anything else that's gonna come up, because I need to know. Hopefully we'll be done on Tuesday, we'll cancel the Wednesday, but if we need to, we'll go into Wednesday. And I do know how to recess to a time certain, so you may be here Thursday if no one is coming to a consensus. So, with that, comments from the senators?
So moved.
We don't have a motion yet. We have a motion by Senator Birdsall to come out of executive session, seconded by Senator Rosenwald. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Our business of the day being complete, we are adjourned.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dan, we did some day this morning, so we'll go this weekend.
Oh, yeah. We're going upstairs, right?
Are we going upstairs? Oh, okay.
Okay, you're going up with them.